Hello all and welcome back. Today we are going to do something which I believe has never been fully demonstrated in Excel VBA before. We are going to build a modern dynamic organizational chart which not only shows the employee name but also the designation and the employee pick automatically generated from data using Excel VBA. To make this even more exciting and relatable, we'll use the real-world example of Apple's leadership structure. So you can see how this approach can be applied to any company or organization. What makes this project stand out is that most VBA org charts have always been very simple, either text only or manually designed. But this solution creates a fully styled org chart using a custom designed shape template complete with automatically connected shapes and photos filled directly inside circular frames, all powered by VBA code. As far as I know, and I could be wrong, but I believe nobody has ever built and demonstrated a professional quality automated org chart using just Excel VBA. In this tutorial, I will explain the logic first that I'm going to follow, and then I'm going to take you through the structure and live coding step by step, explaining exactly what every part of the code does. If you ever wanted to take your Excel plus VBA to the next level, not just automating data, but also design, then this video is the one that you're looking for. So let's get started. Before we jump into the code, let me quickly show you where I got the data for this project. We'll be using the leadership structure of Apple, and for that I have referred to the publicly available interactive org chart on the Organimi website. This is the website. I've downloaded the names, designations and photos of the key leaders, and I organized them inside the datasheet of my workbook. Let's go back to the Excel workbook. As you can see here, column A, B and C contain the employee names, titles and manager names. In column D, I have added the file path for each employee's photo, which I have stored separately in a folder on my computer. This allows the VBA code to automatically pull in each person's image and insert it into their circle on the org chart. If you want to follow along or try this out yourself, I have also made this Excel workbook available for download. You'll find the download link in the description below this video. First, we will create a template shape which will be the building block of our org chart. We will design it once and then the VBA code will duplicate it dynamically for every employee in the hierarchy. We are going to design the template in the data sheet, so it stays safely out of the way of the actual org chart we'll be generating later. The org chart sheet is where our full org chart will be drawn automatically by VBA. Currently, it just has the Apple logo. I have named it as Apple. I've done this so that I do not delete this logo when I'm deleting all the shapes in the worksheet. So what happens is every time the macro runs, it deletes all the shape in this worksheet so that it becomes an empty sheet where the org chart can be created. And in that code, what I also do is I check if there is a shape called Apple, and if it is, then it does not delete that. Except that shape, it deletes all other shapes. So let's go back to the data sheet. We will create a template here. In my last video, I showed you how to insert shapes and how to extract color codes so that you can use it in your shapes. If you have not seen that, then I recommend watching that video first. Okay, let's continue. First, we will insert a rounded rectangle. Click on the Insert tab. Click on the Shapes drop down. And this is the rounded rectangle. Click on that. This rectangle will hold the employee name and title. Draw it on the worksheet. Once you have placed the rectangle, click on the name box at the top left of Excel and name this shape to employee details. This name is critical because our VBA code will look for this exact shape to update the text later. Now let's format this rounded rectangle. The foundational colors of the Apple logo are white, silver and black. So let's use silver for this rectangle. Feel free to use any other color if you wish. Go to the Shape Format tab if it is not already selected. Under the Shape Outline, hover your mouse over weight and then click on 1/4 of a point. Next, click on Shape Fill. Let's select this one. This is close to the silver color. Let's also give it some effect. This is not mandatory. If you do not like this, then skip this step. However, I'm going to go ahead and give a shape effect. Click on this shape effect drop down. In shadow, select this particular option, which is inside top right. So this shape is done, looks nice. The next shape that we will enter is the perfect circle. So again, go to the Insert tab and Shapes menu, and this is the perfect circle. Press the Shift key on your keyboard and then draw it so that the shape does not distort. Now, this circle will hold the employee photo. Resize and position the circle above or inside the rectangle, up to you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to place it right in the center, just like it is right now. Just ensure that while resizing, press the Shift key to maintain the aspect ratio. Let's give this shape a name as well. We will call it Employee Pick. We are going to format this circle as well. Go to Shape Outline and set the weight to, let's set it to 1.5. Yeah, this looks nice. Leave the fill color as it is. It doesn't matter because this will be filled with an image. After you have placed the circle over the rectangle, as I've done it right now, you can ensure that the circle and the rectangle are center aligned. How can you do that? Just select both the shapes. Then under Shape Format, click on Align and click on Align Middle, or rather Align Center, sorry. We need to move the circle slightly above because this center has to be on the border of the rectangle. So let's do that. Perfect. Once the alignment has been done, select both the shapes, right click on them, hover your mouse over group and then group them. Let's give a name for this grouped shape as well. Let's call it Org Node. This completes the template setup. You can style the rectangle and circle however you want. Colors, borders, shadows, fonts, etc. Because whatever you design here will be replicated for every person when the VBA code runs. I'm not going to make any more modifications to this. I'm going to keep it as it is. Let's move this slightly here so that in case you want to add more data here, you can do that. And that's it. The template is ready and we can start working on the VBA code to bring it all to life. Before we start writing the code, let me explain the logic that we are going to follow. We are not just dropping shapes randomly. There's a simple but smart approach that helps us figure out who goes where and how everything connects. So we'll start with some basic data. Each row in our dataset has 4 things: the employee's name, their designation or title, their manager's name, and the path to their profile photo. That's all we need. From this, we are going to figure out who's at the top, who reports to whom, and how to draw the entire structure. The first thing our code will do is look for the one person who doesn't have a manager. That's usually the CEO or the chairman. Since they report to no one, they become our starting point. We will call this the root of the org chart. Now here's where it gets a little interesting. Once we have the root, we'll check who reports to them. Then for each of those people, we check who reports to them and so on. This is where we use something called recursion. You don't have to worry too much about the term, but think of it like the code calling itself over and over to go deeper into the structure. Every time we find someone with people reporting to them, we draw those shapes first and only then place the parent in the center. This way, the manager is always centered above their team. To make sure the chart doesn't get messy, we will also use a kind of grid system. So every new person gets placed in a neat horizontal slot. If they don't have any team members, they just go into the next available spot. If they do have a team, we figure out the center of that group and place them right above. And once all the shapes are placed, we'll go back and draw the connector lines between each manager and their team members. We'll use 3 lines for each connectors so that they look like a proper elbow joint instead of a diagonal mess. Well, that's the full idea. It's simple, clean, and once you see it working, it'll make complete sense. Now, let's jump into the code and start building this step by step. Press Alt F11 to open the Visual Basic editor. If this is your first time using it, do not worry, I've got a separate video titled Visual Basic Editor and Introduction, where I walk through all the basics. Inside the editor, insert a module. You can do that by clicking on this icon and then clicking on Module. In this module, we will create a procedure and we will name it Create Org Chart. So let's do that. We'll be working with data and org chart sheet, so let's declare variables for it and initialize them. Now every time we run this macro, it will add the shapes in the org chart worksheet, which is this sheet, which means we will have to delete all existing shapes first, except the apple shape. So let's write a code for that. So in this code, what I'm doing is I'm looping through all the shapes in this worksheet and I'm checking if the shape name is not apple because we do not want to delete the apple logo. And if it is not apple, then I'm simply deleting it. Next, let's get the organization data into an array. So let's go to the data sheet for a moment. And this is our data. So for this, we will have to find the last row and then construct our range, which will be stored in an array. We are finding the last row so that we do not have to hard code the last row which has data. Okay, so let's go back. Let me walk you through this line by line. Here we have declared 2 variables. Last row is going to hold the last row number in our data. Basically, how far down the data goes in column A. And org data will be an array that stores the actual values from the data sheet. Then comes this line. This might look a little intimidating at first, but it's doing something very useful. We are telling Excel, start from the very bottom of column A and go upward until you hit the last filled cell. That's how we find the last row of actual data. Not the bottom of the sheet, but the bottom of our real content. Finally, in this line, we are saying, now take the range from A2 to column D of the last row we just found and store all of that into our org data array. That means all the names, titles, managers, and photo paths, the entire data set is now sitting inside a single variable. This makes it super efficient to loop through everything later while building the chart. Now, in any hierarchy, there's usually one person who doesn't report to anyone. For example, the chairman in this case. So let's build a code to find that. So let's understand this code. Here we have declared 2 variables. I is just for our loop counter We'll use it to go through each row in the data. Root name is where we'll store the name of the person at the top of the org chart, usually the chairman or CEO or whoever doesn't have a manager. And here we'll loop through all the rows in our org data array. In this line, what we are saying is start from the first row of data and go till the last. Then comes the key check. Here, column 3, which is column C in the sheet, contains the manager name. If that's blank, it means this person has no manager, so they must be at the top of the hierarchy. And once we find them, we save their name in the root name variable. Column 1 or column A is the employee name, and that's what we assign to root name. After that, we simply exit the loop because there's no need to keep checking once we have found the top person. So we simply break out of the loop. In short, this bit of code finds the person who doesn't report to anyone and saves their name. That's where our org chart will start from. Now let's move on to a really important part of the code, which is building the relationship between managers and their team members. For this, we will use a dictionary object. In this dictionary, we will store each manager's name as a key, and the value will be a list of employees who report to that manager. So let me write the code quickly again and then I'll explain it. So here we are creating a dictionary called childdict. This is where we'll store each manager's name as a key, and the value will be a list of employees who report to that manager. Think of it like this. For each manager, we are building a list of their direct reports and storing that in this dictionary. Now we loop through our data again. This just goes through every row of data one employee at a time. Inside the loop, we check if the person has a manager, that is column C is not blank. Then we go ahead and store this relationship. In this line, we are checking if this manager already exists in our dictionary. If they don't exist yet, it means this is the first person reporting to them. So we create a new entry. We are creating a new array with just that one employee's name. But if the manager already exists in the dictionary, that means we have already added some direct reports to them. So now we want to add another person to their team. For this, we use this line of code. Here we are using a helper function called join arrays to take the existing array of names and add the new employee to it. Since VBA arrays don't grow automatically, this function takes the current array of employees and appends one more name to it. And then it returns the updated array. Let's look at the helper function join arrays and see what is it doing. This function takes two inputs, ARR, which is an existing array, and new item, a new value we want to add to that array. And it returns a new array with the new item added at the end. We are using this specifically while building a manager-team relationships whenever a manager already has some direct reports and we want to add one more name to that list. Here we create a new array called result and we resize it to be one element bigger than the original array. This way we can copy all the old values and still have room to add the new one. This loop simply copies over all the values from the old array into the new one. And here we store the new item in that extra slot at the end of the array. Finally, we return the updated array now with the new value added. So in short, join arrays is like a tiny utility function that helps us dynamically grow arrays, since VBA doesn't let you just do something like arr.push like other languages. So this for I loop helps us build each manager's list of direct reports dynamically as we loop through the data. This way, by the time the loop finishes, The child dict will contain every manager's name as a key and a list of employees who report to them as the value. This is what we'll use to draw the org chart level by level, connecting each person to their manager. Now that we have prepared a data and figured out who reports to whom, let's talk about how we are going to lay out the org chart visually on the worksheet. We want each shape, meaning each person, to be neatly positioned on the org chart sheet with proper spacing between siblings and between different levels of the hierarchy. So before we start placing any shapes, we need to define a few layout related variables. Three variables that I can instantly think of are the size of our org node template, which we'll grab directly from the shape we created earlier, the spacing between shapes both horizontally and vertically, and a counter to track where we are on the x-axis as we move across the page. Once these are set, we'll have full control over the structure, alignment, and spacing of the entire chart. And that'll make sure everything looks clean and professional once it's generated. Now let's write that part of the code. Alright, so this block of code is where we actually initialize the layout settings that we discussed earlier. Here we are declaring all the variables we'll use to control how the org chart is laid out, the size of each shape, the spacing, and our X position counter. These two lines just grab the actual width and height of the template shape we created earlier in the data sheet. That way, no matter what size your node is, the layout will always adapt accordingly. Here we are setting how much space we want between each shape. 60 points horizontally and 50 points vertically between levels. Feel free to change these values when you're experimenting so that you can see the effect of it on the org chart. And finally, here we reset our X position tracker to 0 so we can start placing shapes from the far left. So this is the part that sets the foundation for the entire layout. Once this is done, we are ready to start placing people on the org chart. Now that we have finished setting up the layout with the shape size, spacing, and our horizontal position tracker, the next step is to actually start placing the shapes for each employee onto the org chart sheet. And we are going to begin with the root person, the one at the top of the hierarchy. From there, we'll go down level by level and place all the other people below them, based on who reports to whom. Now, because this kind of layout involves a tree structure where each person can have multiple children and each of those children might have their own children, we are going to need to use recursion. So instead of writing all the placement logic inside the main subroutine, we'll create a separate procedure called place nodes. This will make the code much cleaner and allow us to call the same procedure repeatedly for every person in the hierarchy, no matter how deep it goes. In this procedure, we'll figure out where each shape goes. We'll be duplicating the template shape. We'll be positioning the group and updating the name, title, and the image, the photo. Once that's ready, we'll just call it once with the root person's name and level 0 and let the rest of the structure build itself automatically. Let's go ahead and let's create that procedure now. Now you might be wondering, why is place nodes written as a function and not just a regular sub-procedure? That's because we actually want this procedure to calculate and return a value, specifically the horizontal position, which is center X of the shape that was just placed. Let me explain. When we are drawing the org chart, each person needs to be positioned not just vertically by level, but also horizontally based on where their children are placed. So as we go down the hierarchy using recursion, we calculate the positions of all child nodes first. And then we need to place the parent in the center of all their children. And that center value is what we return from the function. So right at the end of the code, we have place node is equal to center x. That's our return value. It tells the parent node, hey, this is the x position where you should be centered based on your children. So if we had returned this as a sub procedure, which doesn't return anything, we wouldn't be able to pass that position back up the tree during recursion. That's why we use a function here, not just to do the placement, but also to return the final position of each node to its parent. Also, now we use some variables in the function which were declared in the procedure above. So to make them accessible in the function, we'll have to declare them at module level. Let's check what all those variables are. Click on debug and then click on compile VBA project. And we get a compile error, variable not defined. That's because child dict is declared in this procedure, which means this is declared at procedure level and hence it cannot be accessed by function place nodes. So we need to move it out of the procedure and declare it right at the top, which is at the module level. So let's do that. Let's click on debug compile VBA project again. This time it says grid X is not defined. Same reason. So we need to move grid X from here and move it right on top. So we have done that. There are many other variables which are declared at procedure level, which is in the previous procedure. So I need to move them out of that procedure and declare it at module level. So I'm going to quickly do that now. Now that we have fixed our variable declaration, let me explain what we are doing here in this code. The place nodes function is the heart of our org chart generator. So it is important that we understand what this is doing. This is the procedure that recursively places each person in the chart, creates their shape and positions them properly. The function takes two inputs, EMP name, which is the name of the employee we are placing, and level, which tells us how deep they are in the hierarchy. 0 for the CEO, 1 for their direct reports, and so on. The function returns a double, which will be the X position where the shape gets placed. Here we are declaring a few variables. Children will hold the list of direct reports for this employee, if any. First X, last X, and center X will help us calculate the horizontal position. Here we are checking if this person has any direct reports in our dictionary. If it has, we will pull out their list of children and store it in the children variable. We then place the first child by calling the same function again recursively and store the X position where the child ends up. Here we loop through the rest of the children and keep placing them one by one, each time going one level deeper in the hierarchy. Here we calculate the center position for the parent node, which is placed in the middle of its children. If there is only one child, first X and last X are the same, so we take that position. If the person has no children, it means they are a leaf node. So we just place them at the next available horizontal slot and move the grid X counter forward. Here we are duplicating the original org node template from the data sheet. We cut it and then paste it into the org chart sheet. I have added do events here. This will ensure that the shape is placed in the clipboard and the clipboard is ready before the paste happens. Here we get a reference to the newly pasted shape group, which is now at the end of the shapes collection. And here we position the shape based on the level and horizontal center. We also give it a name like box underscore Tim Cook underscore 1. So it's easy to identify later. Now ideally we want each shape to have a unique name. But what if two people have the same name? And hence, to make the name unique, we are using wsorg.shapes.count, which will give us the current number of shapes on the org chart sheet after the new shape has been pasted. This will make the new group name unique. Here we are declaring subshape to loop through the items inside the group, and we get the image path for this employee. For this, we created a very simple but essential function, getImagePath. This is the function. So in this function, we start by declaring a loop counter j and a variable called imgPath, where we'll store the result, which is the actual file path of the employee's image. Here we'll loop through the org data array and check if the name in column A matches the employee name we are looking for. Then we grab the image path from column D, which is org data j, 4. Store it in image path and simply exit the loop. And here's the return line. This is where the function actually returns the image path. Here we look for the rectangle inside the group, which we named employee details earlier. We set its text to the employee name and designation with a couple of line breaks to space it out. The reason why I have done this is because if I don't do this, then the employee details will start from the top. And if you look at this, there is a circle for the image and I want the name to be 2 lines down. Just like we created the getImagePath function, we also created getDesignation function. Let me take you through it. This function is responsible for retrieving the employee's designation or title based on their name. We start by declaring j as our loop counter and desc as a variable to hold the designation once we find it. We then loop through each row of the org data array. Column 1, which is org data j, 1, is the employee name, and column 2, which is org data j, 2, is the designation. As soon as we find a match, we store the designation into the desc variable and then immediately exit the loop using exit for. And here's the return line. This is where the function actually returns the designation. Okay, let's continue. Here we are formatting the name. We are making it bold, dark blue, and a little bigger. Then we are formatting the designation line. Smaller regular text in black. Basically what we are trying to achieve is as shown here. After this, we are now looking for the circle inside the group named employee pick. If the image file exists at the specified path, we will fill the circle with that image using .userPicture. After we have filled the text and image, we store this shape in our dictionary so we can come back and draw lines between it and its manager later. And one more thing. We have not initialized the shapeDict object, so let's do that in the first procedure. We'll do that right where we initialized childDict. So copy this line and then paste it here and rename this to shapeDict. We have already declared this object here. Okay, let's go back. Finally, we return the X position where we place this person, so that if this is a child, the parent can use that to figure out its own position. Now we will call this function in the first procedure. So copy the function name, place nodes, and then root name, 0. So root name is the name of the topmost person in our hierarchy, like the chairman. And 0 tells the code that this person is at level 0 of the org chart, the very top. After this, we have to create connector lines. But let's first test if the shapes are being created. For this, we will run this procedure create org chart. But instead of running this procedure from here, I will run it from the worksheet. Right now, this worksheet is empty. I will run the macro from here so you can see the org chart building right in front of you. So let's run that. Awesome! It created the shapes and they look nice. Now let's write a procedure to add the connectors. So let's go back to the VBA code and we will start writing the code here. So we start by declaring all the variables we'll need. J is for looping through the data. EMP name and MGR name for each employee and their manager. Parent shape and child shape is to refer to the actual shapes on the sheet. And x1, y1, x2, y2 will store the exact coordinates where we'll draw the connector lines. So here we loop through every employee in our data. Column 1 gives us the employee name and column 3 is the manager's name. And here we only want to draw connectors if the person has a manager. Otherwise, they are the root and don't need a connector. And hence the check if manager name is not blank. Here we get the shape references for both the manager and the employee from our shape dict, which we populated earlier when placing the shapes. Here we calculate the bottom center of the manager's shape. This is where the connector starts. And this gives us the top center of the employee's shape, the end point of the connector. Finally, we draw 3 lines to simulate a clean elbow style connector. A vertical line down from the manager, a horizontal line across to align with the employee, a vertical line down to reach the employee's shape. This makes the connectors look clean and professional rather than drawing a single diagonal line which can look messy in org charts. And that's it. We loop through all employees and draw connectors wherever there's a manager-employee relationship. So basically this sub goes through each row of data and draws elbow connectors between each manager and their team member. The result is a clean, structured org chart where every relationship is visually connected. Alright, now it's time to test everything we have built. But before that, we have to call this procedure in the first procedure. Okay, let's go back to the worksheet. I'm not going to delete these shapes. These will automatically get deleted when the macro runs. Let's do one thing. Let's remove the grid lines so that we can have a clearer view. Okay, let's go to the developer tab and let's run the macro. And there it is, exactly what we wanted. A fully dynamic, professional-looking org chart generated from scratch using VBA, complete with names, designations, photos, and perfectly routed connector lines. You can now adapt this for your team, department, or client. Just update the data, swap the images, and run the macro. The chart will build itself. This is the kind of automation that saves hours and impresses instantly. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed building it with me. If you liked this tutorial, feel free to give a thumbs up and share it with someone who would like this kind of Excel magic. And hey, if you want to support this channel, feel free to show an extra love by clicking on the super thanks button below the video. This will help support the channel and it keeps these tutorials coming. If you have any questions regarding this tutorial, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Or you can also email me on support@tamexcel.com. I also have a Facebook group. Feel free to join that. The benefit of joining that Facebook group is you can ask lengthier questions, you can upload screenshots, and there are so many experts who would be more than happy to help you out. If you like the way I explain things and if you would like to support this channel, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to this channel. The main benefit of subscribing is that you will instantly get an alert when I release the next video. I would also like to inform you that there's a playlist you can learn at your own pace. If you're serious about learning Visual Basic programming from scratch, and that too using high quality videos which are absolutely free, then go ahead and watch that playlist. And I'll see you soon in the next one.